This video is going to be about essentially so this video is going to be about the monstrosities of I-10 in Texas and I-5 in California, and also why the interstates in the Great Plains area, as in so long. 70, 90. Well, I was going to talk about 94, but that's not an immediate priority. So, as for, so as for I-10 in Texas, while most of the interstates in the Great Plains, I'm not too sure about I-40 in Oklahoma. I know it's around a little under 300 kilometers, which is around 180 miles in Texas. I'm actually not sure how much it spends in Oklahoma. But while in the Great Plains, these interstates, I am gonna just tell you this immediately. They're longer than normal. They're longer than what you normally see in an interstate in like a state. Like those exit numbers get huge. But the thing is, though, is the fact that while they are bigger than normal, I-10 in Texas is helped by several factors. At 880 miles, or 1,410 kilometers, it takes up over a third the route of I-10, and this can be seen by Santa Monica, California. Anthony, Texas, the town just before you reach El Paso, Texas, is that town is closer to Santa Monica, California, than it is to Orange, Texas, on the other side of the state where I-10 enters Louisiana. And Orange is closer to Jacksonville, Florida, than it is to Anthony, Texas, or really El Paso, Texas. You can drive in Texas for nearly 15 hours, assuming that there's no traffic, meaning that it's guaranteed that at some point it's guaranteed that you're gonna sleep. It's such a monstrosity, in fact, that Texarkana, Texas, is closer to Chicago, Illinois, than El Paso, Texas. That's how big Texas is. And that's not even the longest road in Texas. US Route 83 is 893 miles, or around 1,440 kilometers in the state. It goes north-south, but there are other factors that do complicate it. Such as, one of the things that complicate it is the fact that you spend 200 miles going due west from Brownsville to Loretto, parallel to the Mexico border, meaning that it is parallel to Interstate 2. It doesn't even shoot up north until you reach Interstate 35 in Loretto, which is around 500 miles or 800 kilometers in the state, which is around 20 minutes. No, not 20 minutes. Like 8 hours and 20 minutes. However, then it goes northwest and it goes into the Texas Panhandle, which I believe means that I would power Interstate 27, though I wouldn't be entirely sure. What makes Interstate 10 so long is the fact that for over 200 miles or 320 kilometers, it is essentially due south of New Mexico. So if you're wondering, like Interstate 40 goes across the entire state of New Mexico. That's 375 miles, 600 kilometers across the state, which is over 6 hours of driving time. Whereas it's only around 160 miles or 250 kilometers, which is less than 3 hours drive of I-10 in New Mexico. That's because half of New Mexico, half the southern strip of New Mexico, doesn't border Mexico, rather it borders Texas to the south, meaning that New Mexico is northwest of Texas. Interstate 25, which largely runs through central New Mexico, begins at Interstate 10 in Las Cruces, the same city that Interstate 10 goes into Texas from. But Las Cruces is actually technically in western New Mexico. Technically. And in Interstate 40 goes across the entire state. Another reason why it's so short in Texas, though, is because it just goes across the Texas Panhandle through the relatively major city of Amarillo, but then it goes into Oklahoma. Whereas Interstate 10 persists through Texas all the way to the eastern border of the Sabine River Bridge in Louisiana. Interstate 20 is also 640 miles, which is over 1,000 kilometers in Texas. The reason why 20 is so long is because it begins at exit 187, around 3 hours from the New Mexico border at I-10 at Scrogan's Draw. Which, if you think that that's a remote Texan town in the middle of nowhere, correct, it is in western Texas. If you're wondering, western Texas, especially the Panhandle, is a lot more remote than eastern Texas. Like, I mean, if 5 large cities of Texas are all in eastern Texas, I mean, San Antonio is technically in the western half, but 35 largely splits Texas in twain. It's just that we think that's the western half because, you know, Panhandle, but then the border, but then Texas becomes very small north-south. But that's the thing. 20 at points, if the curve was more drastic, would go through the southeastern corner of New Mexico. Had 20 not ended at 10, but instead ended at a place due north of Scrogan's Draw to Interstate 40, then 20 would have also, then 20 would have went through New Mexico as well. Like it kind of got gypped of a state. But that's Texas and its monstrosities. What about California and its monstrosities? Interstate 5 in California, you don't see those often in New York, I'm telling you. Interstate 5 in California is 800 miles approximately, which is just under 1,300 kilometers. You can spend over 13 hours driving on Interstate 5 in California. So what makes it such a mighty feared route across the Californian Republic? Well, it goes from San Diego, California on one end to, I believe, somewhere around Redding, California. No, It's only a mile 636. I actually don't know where, but at the Oregon border, by the time it even reaches there, you're over halfway across the entirety of the route. So, the reason is because California is tall, but not wide. California is one of the skinnier states of the United States. It's one of the skinnier states of the United States. Largely because of how it gets pushed back by Nevada. So you've heard of the California slant. The California slant is essentially how California pushes westward across the ocean. But there's also the Nevada slant as Nevada gets further west, eventually curving in Lake Tahoe. So the thing is that like Interstate 10 is around 240 miles of a little under 400 kilometers, around 4 hours of water driving in California. And 80, the other interstate that goes cross state, is about 200 miles or 320 kilometers, a little over 3 hours worth of driving in California. But that's not that long. And it gets even crazier because I believe, I actually remember, I believe California goes into Oregon at Hill, California. In any case, US 101 in Oregon is 814 miles, and considering that only begins in LA, that's kind of impressive. But that's because I-5 goes through the Central Valley, whereas US 101 goes along the coast. Well, in any case, on to why the interstates that go through the Great Plains spend such a long distance. We're going to begin with I-70, which spends 440 miles in Kansas. And if 440 miles does not sound like a crazy enough distance to you, doesn't sound like a crazy enough distance for you, then I must have forgotten to mention that 440 miles is like 700 kilometers. 700 kilometers means that this is over 7.25 hours of driving time. I believe it spends a little bit longer, about by like a couple miles or kilometers in Colorado. Regardless though, that's an impressive distance. That is quite an impressive distance. And the reason why it's such an impressive distance is because the Great Plains states are wide but not tall. Although there is no north-south interstate, I know it sounds hilarious, there's no north-south interstate in the entirety of California. There's no north-south interstate in there's no north-south interstates in the entirety of because no one else does in the entirety of Kansas. I mean, I-35 does run for 240 miles, or a little under 400 kilometers in the state for around 4 hours. But it largely cuts off southeastern Kansas from the rest of the state. So it goes from Oklahoma to Missouri. Also, it's roughly parallel to the Kansas Turnpike. Although not all of it's on 35, and even some of it's on 70, it's roughly parallel to it. 35 and 70 intersect in Kansas City, Missouri, and, you know, where in Nebraska? Is there North South going to say Nebraska? Nope. There are two interstates here. 80, which spends 450 miles, over 7.5 hours, cross state from Wyoming, which it spends 400 miles, 640 kilometers in, nearly 7 hours of driving time through, all the way to California. California, Nebraska, but you have 80 and then you have 76. I don't know what's in California, but you have 76, which also runs to the state. Interstate 76 doesn't go across the entire state. It only runs for 5 kilometers before going into Colorado. Yeah. And like what also makes 70 so incredible is considering how busy it is. It goes to the two largest cities of Missouri, and considering just how long it spends in Missouri, it's surprising it's only running for 250 miles, which is actually 400 kilometers. Like, it's surprising that it runs for just 4 hours in the state, considering it what it has to go through. But I don't know. It's probably gonna take more than 4 hours though, because there's probably gonna be traffic along your way in Missouri, and maybe even Colorado, considering that you're going through Denver. But as for as for But as for South Dakota, Interstate 40 spends 410 miles or 660 kilometers in the state, which is nearly 7 hours. It goes from Wyoming, where it goes for 205 miles or 330 kilometers across the northern tier of the state. Northern tier across the state. Until Interstate 25, where it goes north and into Montana, which is actually what spends the longest amount of time. It spends 560 miles, which is close to 900 kilometers. But at Interstate 94, it actually dips south. And speaking of 94, It runs in North Dakota for only 350 miles or 560 kilometers, so for around 6 hours. The reason why it spends less time is because all these other ones dip, whereas 94 is practically pin straight. As for North and South Dakota, there are interstates 29 that measure how long it is north-south in the very eastern part of the state. Although, let's be honest, I forgot the distance. Ugh.